Welcome, everybody. These are pictures that I've taken over the past just couple weeks here at Wolf Ridge. And I like to start these where you can see a little bit about what's going on at Wolf Ridge. We had a lot of flowers, and I saw that little wasp right there. A cuckoo wasp is what it's called. Oh, we graduated our brand new student naturalist every year. It's fun to see their faces and get started. And they even started teaching. Look at this. We've got a voyageur there teaching. Everybody gets to be a voyageur at some point. We got birds migrating. This is all what's been happening over just the past few weeks. Fascinating little bugs that I've been seeing around. And again, a lot of birds migrating through. I still am not quite certain what that bird is. Colors. We're starting to get colors as well. The picture that I could have taken today would have had a lot more colors. I didn't get that in here. Lots of cool mushrooms that have been popping up, or at least popping because of the water around here. Oh, last of the wasps out there, which are really cool. Oh, and the fog over on Leskinen Lake. I love that every single year. We got groups here out there paddling on Raven Lake. What fun is that? Oh, and today I saw this blue jay, and seconds later, I saw this hawk chasing it. That was really fun. But again, my name is Joe Valevsky. I'm a naturalist here at Wolf Ridge. Welcome to our 50th speaker series. For those of you who joined us last time, Jack Pichotta shared some stories, and we all realized that one session was not enough. And I'm fearful that two sessions won't be enough either for all the stories that we'd love to hear. I love that, actually, but I think we're going to do our best to see if we can do that. There's going to be a variety of stories. And I just want to make sure we get everybody in here. Meredith, do you think we have everybody who's in the waiting room right now? There might be a few other people. What I ask is that folks who are watching, that you remain muted. You can show your videos so that we get to see your smiling face. It's always great as a storyteller to be able to see who we're talking to. But I'm going to stop sharing this and pass it over to Pete Smerud, I believe. And we're going to be able to, let's see here. There we go, Pete.
Hello, Joe. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome this evening to what Joe has set up very well. For those that may not know me, my name is Peter Smerud. I'm the executive director here at Wolf Ridge. And I have the pleasure and true joy of following something that Jack and Gina Pichotta created many, many years ago. This is an ongoing component of our 50th series that we actually started quite a while ago, and that almost every month we've been conducting these Zoom gatherings where the Wolf Ridge community can come together from near and far. And so welcome this evening to all those that can join us. Joe set it up well that this is a continuation, part 2, of listening to our founder, Jack Pichotta, and his wife, Gina, tell us some stories of how this place got going. And tonight, the focus is a bit more of how we made that leap from Isabella to Finland, and those early years here in Finland, how the land came to be, how the buildings came to be, how Wolf Ridge, that most of us now know it as, up here perched overlooking Lake Superior, nestled between Lake Superior and the Boundary Waters, what we are today. And this will take us up, I bet, up into the early 2000s. I'm often asked, and Joe described it well, how things are going right now at Wolf Ridge. Things are going well. The school year is off and running, and we have already had well over a dozen schools attend Wolf Ridge. Schools from Central North Dakota. This week, there are schools from over by Green Bay. We've had schools from south of the Twin Cities, from Duluth, from the Twin Cities, from the Iron Range. We've had schools from all over, along with the new grad students that you saw the picture of. And so we are well underway here at Wolf Ridge, and things are going very, very well. That I think tonight, as you think about the context of the stories, imagine that I want to give you all just an example of the power and impact of what 50 years can do. That Tom Osborne, who Jack knows well, a school teacher that brought fourth graders here for 38 years, was just visiting in Alaska with his wife, Lynn, about a month ago. And he's a fourth grade teacher in Mound, Minnesota. He's used to people coming up to him and telling him stories of how he as their teacher impacted their lives. And he said, I've never been so proud to be part of something like Wolf Ridge when in Anchorage, Alaska, walking down the airport walkway, somebody stops me because I had a Wolf Ridge jacket on and wanted to tell me their story. Then in Homer, down in the Homer Spit, I'm going charter fishing, and they stopped me, and they were passionate about the impact Wolf Ridge had on their lives. And then again, he said he and his wife were in Seward, Alaska, and they were stopped a third time. And he said, I knew Wolf Ridge had impact here in Minnesota. I didn't think about the national or even global impact of what 50 years can do. And so for all of us here this evening, you are a part of that. It has happened because of you, whether your children came, you've donated to the cause, you served as a board member. There's a variety of people here tonight that can represent all those angles. Take some pride in the stories Jack tells, because what is now Wolf Ridge has been created by all of us. But it wouldn't have started. None of this would have occurred if it were not for Jack and Gina. So this evening, I welcome Jack and Gina Pichotta, who are here to tell us a little bit of the stories of part 2 of the founding of Wolf Ridge. Jack?
Thank you, Smud, very much. Your story about Tom rekindled another similar event. Werner Tismer, most of us remember Werner quite fondly, was in Australia in the outback country, and he came across someone with a Wolf Ridge t-shirt on. And I think that happens more than anybody would like to imagine. It's so, you're right, it's pretty cool. Before I start, I want to relate one little issue. At my first session, we looked at a picture of Gina, Betsy, Sally, and Andy, age 32, 6, 4, and 2, at Christmas time in 1972. And one thing that I failed to mention, because I was staying on my time schedule there, was that 7 years later, we picked up another family member.
6.
My 7?
6.
6 years later, we picked up Brew, who is my nephew, and he's lived with us ever since. He's a special ed teacher in St. Paul right now. First, a little bit of recap, just to set the stage. My connection began in 1970 when I wrote the narrative for the proposal to secure funds from Title III of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of '67. I became the director in 1972, and the ELC was incorporated in 1976. Shortly after 1976, we had our first ELC Board of Directors meeting. The Isabella ELC became Wolf Ridge ELC when the program was moved from Isabella to Finland in 1988. What I'm going to do this evening is talk about raising money to buy land and to construct the new campus. And the one thing I want to add, and I'm so pleased that Pete opened this whole process talking about a board member, is that these two parts that I'm talking about this evening, buying land and building the campus, would almost certainly have never happened were it not for a really strong, committed, and dedicated board of trustees. Some of my sweetest memories, really, and if there's time at the end of all this, I'll share some of them, but they're relative to people that were on the board. I think possibly that one reality that expresses for me, and I think for others, just how committed board members are. And Mike and Wynn Latimer were, Mike was a board member for a long, long time. His ashes are now, and his wife's are now spread at Wolf Ridge. That's the kind of commitment that a lot of people brought to the whole process, and especially a lot of board members. Sometimes it's easy to forget about them, but the one thing I want to do is as often as I remember to do it this evening is to relate to you all just how important it was to have a committed, dedicated, and a far-reaching board of trustees. And I suspect that's still the case. You know, it's been 22 years since Gina and I were at Wolf Ridge. A whole lot has happened. At the end of my little talk this evening, if Pete doesn't mention some of that whole lot, I will, because the place is just growing. It's amazing, and it's quite wonderful. Our first objective, really just a year or less after arriving at Isabella in 72, was not just to build a good program, but to eventually be able to relocate the campus, to buy some land and build a new school. For 8 years, and I mentioned this in my first gathering a few weeks ago, we thought we had identified and discovered where that campus would be located. We were the first entity to approach John Delight about buying Camp Tedagouche. And once again, for 8 years, we were quite convinced that that was the place where our new center would be located. And what I'd like to do now, and this hopefully will put it to rest for me, Tedagouche was a big deal for a long time, is explain just exactly how that all came down. Once again, my first meeting with John Delight, the owner of Tedagouche, was in 1974. I went to the Tedagouche camp, met with him down in one of the cabins, brought my little 3-wing folder and some slides and so on, and showed them to him. And basically, I kind of asked him if he'd consider donating it to us. And he said no, but he actually became involved with our effort. John Delight became a member of our board. We held board meetings there. We did a lot of things that we thought might create the initiative to eventually come up with the wherewithal to buy the land and build a new campus there. An indication, once again, of board support is that in 1976, we became a 501c3. And with that, we had to establish a board of directors, and we did. And one of the first initiatives of the brand new board was to support the concept of do it. Keep looking, try to find the ways and means to eventually locate this program to its own campus. And so we kind of played around with Tedagouche. I don't know how else to say it. We never had any money, but we had a lot of enthusiasm and we had a lot of big dreams. We held meetings there. Minnesota Power lent us their helicopter one weekend so that the board members could fly around and look at the land and see where we thought we might like to build a new center. 2 years later, the Nature Conservancy, this is 1978, the Nature Conservancy purchased an option on the property, and with the DNR, their objective was to enable legislation to be passed to create Tedagouche State Park. We were kind of left out of that whole process, except toward the tail end of the legislative year, when the Tedagouche Park bill was being considered, there was a problem getting enough support for it. And so what happened is that in 1979, legislation was added to. Subdivision 7 was written into the park enabling legislation, which said that the DNR would lease land to the Environmental Learning Center. And I can't say for certain that our efforts were seriously impactful on getting the legislation passed. Kind of suspect they were, frankly. But others must have thought that when they put us in there, and the legislation did pass. We had kids attending hearings. I don't remember for a fact, but I wouldn't be surprised if Tom Osborne might not have taken some kids to the Capitol to testify, because that's the kind of participation we had, especially from the teachers and parents that were bringing the kids to the center. So that happened in 79. In 1980, we began planning to locate at Tedagouche, and we hired architects. We did design development. There was a model built. I think it's still in one of the architect's wives' basement. And we seriously pursued the possibility, but it began to become fairly clear that that may not be the best option as far as the DNR was concerned. And in 1981, on March 5th at 10 a.m., I know that for a fact because I was there, there was a hearing held in St. Paul in which the subdivision that stated land would be leased to the ELC was stricken from the legislation. Now, that was kind of dramatic. I think that for a little while, I'm not exactly sure I can even describe how I felt about it. I think it seemed to be disastrous, but here's what happened. Once again, this is going to give you a good close look at what the ELC Board of Trustees was capable of doing. 2 weeks later, 2 weeks after that hearing, on March 21st, the ELC board met and unanimously said, look for another place to go. We want to do this. And so we did. And what did we look at? We looked at 2 or 3 potential sites. We only visited 2 of them. There was a camp over near Grand Rapids, and thank God we didn't go to Grand Rapids and stayed on the North Shore. But we looked at it. And then the other was a for sale sign on Highway 61 down by Kennedy Creek that seemed to imply that there was land for sale up there at Johnson and Kennedy Lakes. And so we inquired about that. We learned that the land around the lakes was owned by Chuck and Mabel Magny. The for sale sign wasn't theirs. One of our board members knew Chuck and Mabel Magny and arranged for me to go and visit with them. And so I went again with my little slide set, my 3-ring binder full of pictures and stuff, and I met with Chuck Magny in the fall of 1981. And first of all, he told me it wasn't for sale. But then he said it could be, and he said, after you've shown me these pictures and stuff, that would be a nice thing to have happening there on that property. And so if I offer to sell it to you, how are you going to pay for it? Now, once again, don't forget that this is me representing my board, okay? I'm not out there like the Lone Ranger. I'm doing what I do and what was supported and urged by my board of directors. And so I basically said, and it was 280 acres. And when he said, how will you pay for it? I said, well, how about if we give you $100,000? Now remember, this is 200 acres of really nice land for 100 grand. That's not a lot of money. And I said, we'll give you $20,000 down and pay the rest over 5 years. And how I recall it was, he stuck out his hand and said, you got a deal. That was the beginning. That was the beginning. And remember, I mentioned that there was a for sale sign down on Highway 61. And as we looked at that for sale sign, we thought, well, that might be the way to get into the land back there that we had just purchased from Charles Magny. But before we heard from anybody on that parcel that's on 61, Ray and Alice Tiemann called. This was in 1982, months or so after we bought the land from Mr. Magny. And I told everybody about this last time, but I'm going to say it again because it is so darn sweet. Ray called and he said, we understand that you're interested in buying land around Johnson and Kennedy Lakes, and we have some that we'd be willing to sell you. And then he described it, and I was still thinking about this Highway 61 issue, and then I realized that it extended right out to County Road 6. And when I asked him how much he wanted to sell it for, he said, and this is true, he said, well, we'll sell it for whatever you think you can afford to pay for it. So we bought it for $200 an acre, 320 acres. And all of a sudden, it's starting to come together, and our interest that Highway 61 site ended. A year later, we of course have been looking at maps to see what we're dealing with down there. We discovered that Lloyd K. Johnson lives in Duluth, owned a lot of land in northern Minnesota, and even I think on some of the islands in Lake Superior, that he owned a big chunk of land there, a lot of it on the Baptism River. And here we go again. I don't remember which of my board members contacted him first. It wasn't me, but we arranged for me to go see him. I brought my carousel slide projector. Isn't that crazy? Carousel slide projector, and my 3-ring binder, and he was willing to sell. And so what happened there is that he and some of my board members figured out the best advantage for the sale. And so what ended up happening with that 520 acres is that Lloyd K. Johnson's donated some of it and sold us some of it. And the result was that we're getting bigger, which was really kind of nice. We used some of the Lloyd K. Johnson land for land exchanges later in actually 12, 14 years later, but that acquisition began to build the land base. I'm sure that last time around I mentioned Marshall Mountain. We knew right from the time that we started talking with Chuck and Mabel Magny that the 40 acres between the two lakes was owned by a couple of families in the cities. And we contacted them, and they wanted a lot of money for the property. I think at our board meetings, I wanted the land, frankly, but at the board meetings, it was suggested, well, we don't really have to worry about not owning it because they're never going to build a road into it. It would cost them a whole lot more money than they could ever get for it. And but we continued to stay in touch with them. And then one day in 1988, got a call. I told you all this last time too, but this is the land focus now. We got a call and they said, we'll sell you the land for, I believe it was $32,000 at 40 acres. And we didn't have $32,000, but we had enough money to give them a down payment and asked about financing the rest on its contract for deed for it 3-4 years. And they said no. And before we had time to seriously pursue any other options, we got a letter from Julia Marshall in Duluth, and it contained a check for $30,000. And the thing I told everybody last time, it's true, it does almost sounds like it shouldn't be true, is that Julia knew absolutely nothing about us wanting to buy that land. It was serendipity. She just decided to send us $30,000 when she decided to send it, and it arrived in time for us to buy that mountain or buy that hill. And we call it Marshall Mountain. Another 160 acres belonged to Diamond Match in Cloquet. In the early 80s, I remember I lived in Cloquet for a while. Gina and I and our kids lived in Cloquet for 5 years. I was teacher there. And I went to the people at Diamond, who I knew. A lot of the forest products people were involved in my Earth Day program in 1970. And I asked them if they would be willing to give or sell the land. And they said no, that they had other potential plans for the property. And so I didn't hear any more about it until in 1990, the president of Potlatch, John, I can't remember his last name, darn it, came to visit Wolf Ridge. And we toured him around. And we asked, and we had then learned that they now owned that 160 acres. And so they had a tour. One of our board members arranged it. That particular board member arranged a whole lot of good things for Wolf Ridge. John Richards. We toured him around. John Colstead was our forestry guy who explained all of what we were thinking about and what we wanted to do. And before he left, he said, I'm going to talk to the guys in the Cloquet plant mill. And if they like it, we're going to give you what you want. And prior to that, when he asked what we wanted, I said, we'd like that 160 acres. We'd like enough money to build a forest ecology building. And we'd like your help in managing our acreage into the future. And so he went down back to Cloquet and met with the mill managers. They were all folks that we knew from our Earth Day program, and they said, yes, let's do this, and they did. So there we go, another 160 acres. Now, we had some parcels of land that belonged to the county that were interspersed within that land which we owned. And so we determined, board, okay, that we would acquire some land so we could do land exchanges. We went to John Delight's family, owner of Tettagoosh, remember, his son, and we arranged to buy Tettagoosh North, which was all of the Tettagoosh property that was located north of County Road 6, of County Road 4. And we bought it. And we used a lot of that land to facilitate land exchanges. And I'll tell you about those in a few minutes. Our last land purchase, kind of interesting in a story here, 40 acres located right close, but not on our entry road entrance on County Road 6. And that 40 acre parcel once had a road on it. And that road went in at the same place that our road goes in. And so for about 300 feet, our road was on that old road. Now that old road was built in about 1916. And it went back to the Callender and Ruska homesteads, which were located on the southeast side of Sawmill Creek. And the reason I'm hesitating is that Ruth Callender, one of the 4 Callender girls, is 103 years old and probably ready to go, I think, quite frankly. But she became a good friend of ours. When we were members of the Historical Society, Gina and I were involved in recording history. And what we ended up in doing is, rather than recording it, we visited with Ruth and we wrote a book about the 4 Callender girls and that homestead that I'm talking about right now. And Gina and I pretty much put it together. I mean, we took notes from Ruth and so on. But anyway, the Callender and Ruska homesteads weren't actively used from probably about 1922 until now. And so that means that the original road that went from County Road 6 back to those homesteads wasn't a road anymore. It had big trees, had trees this big on it. It had trees 80 years old on it. And starting early, like almost in probably 81 or 82, I went to the township after we knew that we had access capacity with the Tiemann property, and asked them if they would abandon that road, and they wouldn't. Now, that introduces kind of an interesting reality. When we moved to Isabella, people really didn't want us to be there. They didn't know what we were all about. They were kind of leery about environmental anything. And the reality is that was true in Finland too. So people were cautious and they weren't quick to to do anything that might encourage us. And so we had a hard time dealing with that road because the owner of the land behind the road wanted it left open, and he wanted our gate removed so he could get in there. And crazily enough, he lived there. He had a road about a few hundred feet away going back into the same land, but he still wanted us to remove our gate so he could get in there if he wanted to. And ultimately what happened is that changed too. Darwin Hovery sold us his 40 acres. Our gate's still there. and everybody came away fairly happy, I think. But that was an interesting process. That Ruska Hovery Calendar Road was an issue for years. I would go to the township meetings and present, tell them what we were all about, you know, so that they wouldn't be concerned about us doing something they didn't like. And it took a while. As a matter of fact, it never occurred that they abandoned that road. And we solved the problem by buying Darwin's land so he didn't have to go back there on our road anymore. Land exchanges started right after we met with our first land purchasing with the Magnies, and we did 3 land exchanges with the state and a couple with the county. And I always thought they took advantage of us. They knew we wanted what we wanted, and they knew that we wanted it well and bad enough so that we were going to go along with probably whatever they suggested. And so we did. We did 3 land exchanges. The first one was we gave up 280 acres of the Lloyd K. Johnson property. No, excuse me. We gave up 200 acres of the Lloyd K. Johnson property, all of it with river frontage on it. And we got 280 acres from the state on the east side of the Baptism River. Now I'm thinking maybe I shouldn't have said they took advantage of us. We got 80 acres more than we gave them, but the river frontage was pretty nice. With the county, we gave 120 acres of ours for 80 acres of theirs. And also again with the county, we traded a big chunk of Tattagouche North for everything else we needed to create a contiguous land area for Wolf Ridge. And it's, Peter, you can correct me, I think it's 2,000 acres right now. I don't know that it'll get any bigger, but wouldn't surprise me. Who can say where Wolf Ridge is going? You know, when you consider where it's come and what's happened in the first 30 years and the next 20, might take over the state. I don't know. So that's the story of the land acquisition. It was nice. Once again, everything required professional help. You know, you're talking about contracts and land exchanges and all that stuff. And I got to be the face of some of those things. But as far as the nitty gritty, get down and get these things all done and organized properly, that was my board members. Without them, it wouldn't have happened. Joe, maybe if you've got time now, we could just take a look at a few of the pictures of the land just to remind us, and then the next event. Well, there's it. Here we go.
Yeah.
See, this was the Ruska and Calendar Road in 19. Actually, it wasn't a road then, but in 1916.
That's fun. Yeah. So some of these pictures go beyond the stories that Jack was sharing. But I think that they certainly are all connected to every single one of those stories. And
Can I throw a comment here?
you bet.
One of the things that after phase one campus work, there's a lot of things we did that required money and energy that weren't provided by the funding that we received during phase one. And this is one of them. I don't know. Gary Olson built some stuff up there, and the guy's an artist. I went to him and asked him, can you build a sidewalk or a walkway off the back of that ridge? He said, sure, and he did. And the kids call it, what do they call it? Do they still call it the stairway from hell?
This is a stairway of health and happiness.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you, Joe.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Wolf Lake, oh, here we go. Now, Wolf and Raven Lake used to be Johnson and Kennedy Lakes. This was Johnson Lake. And Johnson was the guy who owned the property that we bought from Chuck and Mabel Magny. He's a mortician in Two Harbors. And I don't know if he named the lake after himself or if his kids did or what, but it was Johnson Lake. And the other one was Kennedy Lake. And the reason for that is a little intermittent stream that flows out of that small lake that goes down and flows into Lake Superior right at a point where the Kennedy Landing is located. And so that was called Kennedy Creek. And then another story that, what the heck? I went to the DNR, I don't remember when, probably in the 80s. And I said, we want to change the names of those lakes. And the guy that I spoke with, I'm just trying to wonder if I should tell the whole story. I went to the DNR, to the regional administrator, John Schnell, who was on our board, okay? And I said, we want to change the lakes, the names of the lakes. And John said, Jack, you can't do that. It's just, he said, it's something that we really shy away from anymore. But I said, well, look how they got named. My goodness, what difference is, it should make some difference. And then I got a little bit of confidential advice. He said, just change them. He said, we'll get used to it. So they're Wolf Lake and Raven Lake.
And this is Raven Lake. I wanted to have both lakes. Yeah. And there are ravens out there every year. It seems like we see nesting ravens on those cliffs.
Yeah, I love ravens. When there's few of them around, their vocabulary is amazing. They just seem to have so many vocalizations.
And the lakes are so beautiful. We use them for lots of different things, including Voyager Life class. Lots of good stuff out there to see.
Was that in the lake, Joe?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Sawmill Creek, of course. This is Sawmill Creek during the fires. At morning, when we're out bird banding, early in the morning, the fog and just the orange sky. Some of the new stuff out on Lake Superior, a little bit of the shoreline. But I wanted to end right there, Jack, with that Marshall Mountain. That's such an iconic spot, such an important spot.
Yeah, one of the things too, then I'm going to get into raising money, but one of the neat things is that I don't remember what year it was, but we brought Julia Marshall up to Wolf Ridge, and she had lunch with us, and I don't remember how old she was. She was probably 10 years older than I am right now. She was probably in her 90s, and we just had to point at the spot and tell her that was what we call Marshall Mountain, because she wasn't able to walk up there. I'm not sure I would know either, but anyway, okay, let's go to part 2, which is raising money. Some history from 71 until 73. The ELC at Isabella was funded through Title III of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act of 1967. Remember that the proposal was submitted by the Grand Marais School District. I wrote the narrative. I was teaching in Cloquet, and the proposal was funded. In 1971, the Environmental Learning Center at Isabella opened its doors. Between the fall of 71 and the fall of 72, they had more problems than anybody could ever imagine. They range from A to Z, and the State Department of Education had assigned a person to monitor our progress, and we had there was an advisory board, and the conclusion was that if there's going to be second and third year funding, you're going to have to make some changes. And so I was part of the changes. The second week in September 1972, actually it would have been last week, we moved to Isabella. And so for the next 2 years, our income consisted of another 100 grand during year 2 from Title III, and then a final $80,000 from Title III during the third year of the demonstration grant. And what happened is that we did a pretty good job of getting schools to come to the Isabella ELC. By the time the Title III grant funding ended, we were actually self-supporting from fee income. As a matter of fact, during the third year, I never would have admitted this to anyone, but we probably could have gotten by without that 80 grand. And so that left us in a situation where we had some money, and we also had this big dream, okay, of buying land and building a new school. And we were months away from my little trip down to John DeLate at Camp Tedagoosh. So we had some money, and we were able to support some of the efforts that were focused on buying land and building a new school. I want to throw a couple of issues into this whole process right now. Pete, are you watching the clock?
Yeah, you're doing well, Jack, but
All right, I'll hurry.
Yep, you got to keep her going here.
Okay, all right. Anyway, we had feasibility study done for Tedagoosh, and we hired someone. You know, we had a brochure. I told you we did a lot of stuff, but we hired a firm to do a feasibility study, and they basically told us we weren't ready for fundraising. And the other thing they told us, and this showed up a couple more times in the next decade, is that we shouldn't call our program an environmental learning center. They said you should change the word environmental to conservation. Conservation was okay, but focus on just pure environment wasn't necessarily, it opened up too many unknown doors, I guess. And so the feasibility study suggested that we should change our name, which we didn't. We did another feasibility study shortly after the Tedagoosh experience, and same thing. They said you really need to strengthen up your membership and better explain how you're impacting education and so on. And it was always hard to come up with a way to meet those demands that was satisfactory. From 1981 until 88, this is after Tedagoosh. And remember now, that couple of month period from getting removed from the state park to starting with some land, we began to start raising money to build a new school. That was really, really, really hard. I don't know how else to say it. We called the fundraising effort Seeds for the Future. I think there's probably a couple of those brochures up at the center. And we worked at raising money. Now, the bottom line is that, and I've got it written down here, we spent a little over $6 million on phase one. It's just a little bit more than Pete spent on fixing up the Mac dorm. But we spent a bit over $6 million, and $2.1 million came from the state. Pretty amazing. Now, why did that happen? It didn't happen because of me. I still was the person who went out and tried to get everybody excited about this. But the bottom line is that we had board members that had contacts within the legislative process. They invited legislators that were of similar thinking, about the environment and the future, and created a base of understanding that enabled us to get legislative funds for that first phase. In addition to the 2.1 million we got from the state, we got $1 million from foundations. That ain't much. We got $330,000 from the kids that come to the ELC. Surplus fee income, okay? And we got a couple of $100,000 from corporations and $255,000 in the form of smaller donations. And so, but it all added up to about $6 million. And the point being that I forgot to mention, we borrowed 1.7 million too, okay? And an interesting thing about that loan is that we had to go through the legislative process on all of that, and it involved units of government, state and local. And truth be told, while we got the loan, probably due in great part to a couple legislators and the governor, okay? I think I told you last time that Rudy Perpich dropped in on us a couple of times. Pretty neat guy. And so we got the money from legislators, and we were able to secure a loan. And I think it got paid off in about 2007 or so, Pete. I'm not sure.
We got paid off on August 21st, 2008, Jack.
Okay, good date.
Yeah.
The bottom line on that $1.7 million is we probably paid 2.5 or close to $3 million when interest, was.
We paid 3.1.
Pardon?
We paid 3.1 million total.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, worth it, wasn't it?
It was indeed. It was a great day when we signed that last check.
All right. Now here's what happened. This is kind of exciting. After we moved to Wolf Ridge, and those of us that were there will remember this. The day the kids came first, it was raining. It was mucky out. It was just terrible. But it was really, really, really emotional. I don't know about everybody else, but I had to wipe away the tears. So it just felt so good about the whole thing. But we also knew at that point in time that dormitory was booked to capacity forever. We had about 165 or 70 schools that had been using the ELC at Isabella. They all came back again with more kids than we had room for. So we had to put extra mattresses in every room. And so more often than not, the beds were full and there was a couple of kids on the floors for a while there until we got the second dorm built. But that created a situation that was exciting. We went first to the Blandon Foundation. We hadn't had much support from them yet, frankly, okay? But we went to them because of board contacts that we had with Blandon, and we asked them if they would support our expansion, which we called Wolf Ridge 2000. My take on that whole process was that we had a powerful case. I mean, we were full. We had 150 or so schools that wanted to come. We had no room for them. The sooner we got expansion completed, the sooner we were going to be able to do all of that good work with environmental education. And the Blandin Foundation said, we're not going to give you any money for expansion just yet, but we will give you money to help you to build your membership and support base. And they did. So we built up a membership base and considerably well. We signed up a lot of members, a lot of life members. Blandin matched them. We probably brought in a couple, $200,000-300,000. And when that was completed, my board chair, who was Bob Heller at the time, and I went back to Paul Olson at the Blandin Foundation and said, now we're ready. Are you going to help us to expand? And that's when Project EarthSense was born. The president of the Blandin Foundation said, we have other centers like yours that want us to do some things for them. Is there any way that you can include them in what you're suggesting that you'd like us to do for you? And so we went home and we came up with a concept. We suggested that a cooperative effort to raise $25 million be generated. And once completed, that outcome would create a network of residential centers in the state, kind of scattered about in different areas appropriately, that could actually accommodate one grade level of kids in the state school systems. We suggested, and once again, all of this came from Wolf Ridge, all right? We suggested that maybe the Blandin Foundation would consider a grant of $7.5 million if the state would support the effort by $7.5 million, and if the coalition team would raise the final 15. Once again, we gotta focus on Wolf Ridge for a bit here. Okay, there's other centers involved here, but we need to focus on Wolf Ridge. Peter Heegard, a Wolf Ridge board member who recently died, agreed to be the co-chairman of the Project EarthSense effort. It's possible that we would have gotten this done without him, but I think it's also pretty likely that we may not have. Peter had the right contacts at the foundation levels and at the state level. He was a good friend of the governor. He knew all the board members at Blandin. He got the whole, he due primarily to his effort, and Hugh Schilling, who was the co-chair. They got this whole package on the table for consideration. And then what happened is it took a long time. We had another, when we started Project EarthSense, the consensus was that this is such a snazzy concept with such a great outcome that it's going to happen quickly. It didn't. It didn't happen quickly. I personally think that the reason the Blandin Foundation was so excited about it was because they picked up on the Wolf Ridge excitement. The Audubon Center and Eagle Bluff were both day use facilities that hadn't gotten into residential center use yet. But we had such a large base of support users and such a large chunk of potential on the waiting list that it was easy to accept the reality that looking right at the offering as it was at that time, we had about 80% of the schools in the state lined up to use one of those centers. Now, most of them were coming to us, but it looked like it was going to happen. And so we started the Project EarthSense concept. The state agreed, the Blandin Foundation agreed, and a coalition fundraising effort was initiated. There were conditions. The state and the Blandon Foundation money would be released when we did proved success with the coalition effort. It took a long time for us to have enough success to enable the state and the Blandon money to be released to us. And then it got complicated. In the legislation that secured the $7.5 million from the state, it was to be divided according to a schedule between 5 learning centers. And we got to the point where it looked like we were ready to apply for that money. Things changed. The state said, no, we're sorry, but we can't do it that way anymore. If we give any money to anybody other than a public facility, Long Lake and Deep Portage both belong to the county, so they were okay. The other 3 were not. So they said, if you want our money, if you want the state money, you have to agree that the buildings you're going to build with that money will belong to the county. We didn't want to do that. So we went to the Blandon Foundation and said, if this is the way it has to be, will you give your money to us and let the state give their money to the 2 public facilities? And they said yes. But bottom line is that the effort to raise $10 million by the coalition was slow and tedious. We got to the point 5 or 6 years into the process where we began to lose the schools that were on the waiting list. And things began to look increasingly difficult. So we went to the state again and we said, will you let us borrow money to release the state funds? And they said yes, but the 2 public facilities wouldn't do it. So the 3 nonprofits did. Ultimately, what happened is that in 1999, Project EarthSense ended. We actually accomplished our goal of $25 million. Due to inflation and 10 years of time, a lot of the things that we had initially envisioned to occur didn't. But the bottom line is it was done, the network was available, and the ability by those 5 centers to begin attacking what I had always hoped would happen, the possibility of every kid in the state by mandate attending a residential center didn't happen. It may. Pete's working on it now. But those are the stories on where the money came from. Joe, I'm ready for some building pictures if you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So Pete, we've got just a few more pictures here, but I want to be able to share them. So can you see the Marshall Mountain? I want to make sure everybody can see that. Excellent.
Yep.
So
Yes, we can,
move
Joe.
forward here. I put them in an order that kind of made sense to me. I feel like the heart of the entire program is right there in the education building. So when it comes to buildings, that was the most important spot for me to start. That's our second dorm with the solar panels out front there, hot water solar panels. A lot of the action in the dining hall, of course. Oh, and the Forest Ecology building. I was just down there today. We were bird banding, Jack. It was great. We were catching birds nearby.
Oh, everybody, the Forest Ecology building has composting toilets, but because of state regulations, we had to put in a septic system. Didn't use it. Okay.
Oh, the fishing bridge that gets us over there to that building. Oh, standing up on the telescope deck and watching the birds migrating by, sitting there just absorbing the heat. What a great spot that is. A couple campfire rings we've got. It's not just the buildings. There's lots of places like Chickadee Landing. Those of you who have been there know exactly what I'm talking about. That's just one of the other amazing magical spots at Wolf Ridge. Our ski chalet and wetlands building. Of course, we have buildings temporarily out there on Wolf Lake. The Science Center and all the solar panels in front. Can't forget the farm, some of these new things that have been happening since Jack stories. The Mac Lodge, which was obviously the original dormitory that's been renovated. And we've got the Lake Superior Field Station. Want to put all those in there. Oh my gosh. And I forgot about this, Pete, our new ropes course.
Yeah, for folks to may recall that Wolf Ridge built their first ropes course in 1981 up in Isabella in the trees with some help from some NSP type folks who had done power poles and such. And in 81, that was a very foreign concept. People didn't quite get it. And when we moved to Finland, we were in maple trees and they weren't big enough that you could build the ropes course between the trees. And so we moved to towers, and the course we built we started with in October of 88. We just rebuilt just about a month ago. And this is the brand new version of the Ridgetop ropes course that now exists here in Finland. And these are some of the highest used ropes courses in the entire country, approximately 14,000 trips per year on each course, which is unheard of, let alone that we're doing it at 20 below zero in the snow with 4th and 5th graders. That part is, again, a little atypical in the world of high ropes courses.
There we go. So I wanted to end with that because those are some new things since Jack was here, but I turn it back to you two.
7 o'clock.
Look at that.
Jack, well done.
Yeah, I can do it.
Wasn't sure you were going to pull that off there.
Yeah.
Thank you, Jack. This for everyone is brings us to the point in 2000 where we became a facility with about 365 beds. And that is the largest such facility in the entire nation. And it remains in the world of residential environmental ed, the largest such facility. That there are other large summer camps and such, but again, something that's unique that I believe Jack highlighted last time, that in 1980, we became the first accredited school in the nation of this sort. And Wolf Ridge and a few others in Minnesota remain that. That is a Minnesota unique condition, and that to have a facility built specifically for school children, for school teachers to bring their children where they can see, touch, smell, feel, directly hands-on, engage with all the things that they learn about in school. That is still what we do. What Jack and Gina started 50 plus years ago, and what now is, counting with the staff housing that we have here for grad students and such, is now a 400-bed facility. And about 130,000 square feet of buildings on a little over 2,000 acres of land, now with 68 acres of land down on Lake Superior as well. And that is quite a story that's gotten into this place today. Jack, any final words for us before we go tonight? And I'm going to have Meredith talk about some events coming up as well. It's a little forewarning for Meredith.
I think my only final word, and I was looking for it in here, but when I was preparing my notes for this talk, when I wrote in the part about Chuck and Mabel Magny, I said something about I don't remember how I worded it, but I said that what we began with the ending of the Tattagouche experience and the beginning of the current situation was building what eventually became the best facility of its kind in the world. And I sincerely believe that. And one of the things that I like to recall is that during one of our feasibility studies, I think in probably 90 something or other, that outcome was suggested by a couple of board members. What's our goal? We want to make this the best of its type in the world. And quite frankly, I think thanks to everybody who's watching this and everybody who has been part of this, that we made it. I'm really, really happy about that. That's it.
That's wonderful. Well, everyone that Jack, it's appropriate, I think, Jack's focus and support of board members that continued. Lake Superior and things like that, that you saw that standpoint and that source of wisdom and support has remained consistent for our entire history. And there are, you may come to join Wolf Ridge board members. We have two events coming up, one that is a 50th celebration that is for the Prior Lake Savage area community, a long attending set of schools that is coming up, Meredith, September 28th, is that correct?
Yep, September 28th at 6 p.m. at Charlie's on Prior. And these are part of a community social series we're launching, and we're trying to move across the state to all the places Wolf Ridge has affected and gather people together so they can tell their Wolf Ridge story. The stories probably won't be as great as Jack's, but we want to bring people who attended as a student or a chaperone. So we're starting in Prior Lake Savage with our school partners there, and then we'll be moving to other communities across the state. So stay tuned to our social media and website for that. And then our other 50th celebration is in October at the Minnetonka Club, celebrating 50 years and thinking about the next 50 years and how we build the foundation of all those gifts that made it possible to get 2,000 acres. What can we do to raise more funds for our endowment so that the future of ELC and Wolf Ridge is continued for as long as possible.
I love it, because a focus on an endowment to help people remember is really focusing on the perpetuity of Wolf Ridge, and that giving in that way, extending one's own values with their financial gifts to an endowment really assures that the values and the behaviors, the learning that you want to see in the world for kids and the environment will continue in perpetuity. Please join us on October 13th in the Minnetonka Club, and we'll hear some more stories about how at that event, how is Wolf Ridge addressing some of these really key environmental issues? What is their history? How we've developed our programs, as we were in 2000, one of the first to bring out climate change into a subject in our classes, and how and why the freshwater access and awareness issues with their focus at Lake Superior, a variety of other things that we'll be talking about on that evening at the Minnetonka Club in Minneapolis, Minnesota, that you can come and learn, and then also consider how you can spread the message of Wolf Ridge. For what I will leave with tonight, everyone, is I often am asked, how can I help? Well, of course, a financial gift is a way to help. And I have to thank two sponsors tonight, Galen Harms and Scott Gilselson. Their gifts and support for this 50th series for the Fortune Financial Group and the North Star Financial Group are both entities that have supported this series. But others, a vast majority of people on this Zoom event tonight are donors to Wolf Ridge, and we thank you, because you help us and you assure that our work is successful well into the future. But besides giving, spread the word. Our summer camp programs are back. They'll return in 2023. Our family programs, we have adult programs. We have bird banders here this week, right now. We're getting trained in some of our adult programs. And we still have room for some graduate students. If you had somebody that's looking for training in environmental ed that could join our efforts and wants to be trained at Wolf Ridge, that there are spaces there. And we have opportunities here to join the team on all sorts of levels. Creative food service leaders who want to work with our farm fresh produce and bring that to those healthy foods to kids, and to work on cleaning staff, work in our office. There are multiple opportunities and openings right now that we would love to have people spread the word about and help us to continue the mission we've been doing for well over 50 years. Thank you all for joining us this evening. Thank you to Jack. And I could hear Gina on the side, making sure that Jack was on pace and on point, that for telling stories that we will be able to hold now in our memories for a very long time. Thousands of children have come, and thousands will continue to come. Thank you all for making that possible. Good night.
Good night, everyone.